A statement to implicit bias radio listeners from the Kentucky Distillers Association president. Kentucky bourbon is a great success story. Distilling is a $9 billion signature industry in the Commonwealth, responsible for more than 23,000 jobs and $2.2 billion in salaries and benefits. Unfortunately, the return of retaliatory tariffs on American whiskey will have far-reaching consequences across Kentucky, home to 95% of the world's bourbon. That means hardworking Americans, corn farmers, truckers, distillery workers, barrel makers, bartenders, servers, and the communities and businesses built around Kentucky bourbon will suffer. This from, and let me give you his full names just so we make sure we get it right. And I usually don't read stuff here on the show directly like that. Eric Gregory, the Kentucky Distillers Association president. So the tariffs in Canada, obviously now, are going to affect American whiskey. Because apparently Ontario drinks a decent amount of liquor. From the research that we have been able to look at, it's about 1.5%, I think. 1.5%? I mean, we did just finish Mardi Gras in Louisiana. 1.5% is probably nothing on the size of the market. So first of all, I'm curious as to what we here as business people in the Top Secret Podcast Lair think as we introduce you to the crew who's here. We've got Mike Trammell, who's sitting in the chair much like mine from Box Drop. We've got Eli Tate of Gambino's Bakery in Lafayette and Baton Rouge at the bar, alongside Brian the Virus Harmon from Dupree Carrier Godshaw Insurance. And we say the virus with all due love and respect because that virus has been a good thing here for the show.
I'll take it. I like that better than the previous
Triple H
nickname. Yeah. Well, we don't. It's the virus now. So
Well, you've earned it, Mr. Harmon. You have absolutely earned it. And then, of course, behind the production chair, he is Walker Griffon. And Walker, you're a small business guy. I mean, 1% to you probably means an awful lot of money, correct? I mean, it's not an awful lot of money. It's a small amount of money, but it's a larger percentage of your revenue because 1% to you is a lot more than losing 1% of a $9 billion market, correct?
I would say so.
This is what I find, number one, somewhat disingenuous. Because you're talking about an industry that has lived through prohibition in the United States. Liquor was outlawed and distillers found a way. And now you're going to come out with this statement because Ontario is shutting down liquor sales, which, by the way, those bottles are already there. Don't try and tell me they're going to return them. I mean, that's not happening. Mike, we'll start with you, then we'll go to the bar.
I just don't agree with the whole concept of it's going to go away. If you supply a product that people demand, they're going to pay it, even if it has the tariffs added to it, the taxes added to it. It's going to be, you basically look, it's almost to me like, here's something locally. You think about like hotels. Like a hotel, if we go stay in Houston or New Orleans, you're paying an extra tax on that. It's basically like a tariff. It's probably 20, 25%, to be honest. I haven't looked at it lately, but last time I looked, it's probably in the 20s.
Go to New Orleans, it's astronomical.
Yes, but you're paying it. You want that product, be it a hotel, bourbon, whiskey, whatever it may be. If you want that product, you're going to spend the money to buy it.
So you think that people are going to buy it regardless, or I think they're going to maybe create a black market for whiskey up there.
It's going to be an undercover. I mean, what do you call it? A
secondary market, a black market.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's going to really increase that, definitely.
Okay,
but I think it's eventually it's going to all mellow out. Even if the tariffs are still there, it's still people. If they want a product, they're going to pay for it. You put out a good product, people are going to pay for it.
You used an interesting word we're going to come back to in just a minute. Eli, let's go ahead and go to you and see your thoughts.
Yeah, when you first sent this to us, Kavon, that's what I looked at. I was like, who's paying this guy off? Because as a business owner, and when I did my research, that's what I found, just over 1% of the whiskey goes to Canada. So you got to be kidding me. 1% is not, if you can't survive a 1% drop in sales, then you don't need to be in business, number one. Number two, in my industry, we've seen, since COVID, the cost of our materials has gone through the roof. And we've had to have price increases. So we've probably increased our prices since 2020 by 25%. And we're selling more because we put out a good product, and we're selling more than we've ever sold. So
So hold on.
25%, I just don't buy it.
So we've brought out a couple of things here. Number one, we've brought out that Mike talked about demand. Then Eli, you talked about price. This is really interesting. And then when you talked about a little over 1% of the supply, this is the other thing that makes me go, They said a $9 billion industry, and we're going full on Dr. Evil here, right? $9 billion. And then notice they said that contributes $2.2 billion to wages, benefits. Hold on a minute. Are you telling me that your GP is 80-ish% on alcohol? This isn't going to hurt the worker. You still need the worker. This is going to hurt your bottom line to the tune of what? $900 million, roughly, maybe a little more. But that $900 million can't come out of the workers' pockets, or it shouldn't, because if you think they're not operating on lean principles as it is with whiskey, come on. And now let's bring in another part before we go to Brian, because I want to hear Brian's thoughts. Eli, you said something really, really important, which is your costs have gone up since COVID, right? Or through COVID. The whiskey that's being put to market today, you know when it was distilled?
Yeah.
It was distilled pre-COVID. Right now, distillers do have some taxes on those barrels, so they're probably not at a full 80%
That's a good point.
contribution margin. But when you realize and understand that whiskey is a highly, highly profitable business, it takes a lot to get in. It's expensive to get in. But these legacy distillers that already have all their sunk costs covered, they're rolling. They are absolutely rolling. All right, Harmon, what are you thinking?
Y'all all made excellent points. What I wanted to say, not that I think it's going to be a hard time. I'm saying I agree with y'all. It's not going to be much to overcome 1.5% disruption in the market. But even if it were an actual event that we needed to worry about, specifically for bourbon, okay, before we get into the rest of the tariffs, but the last time the industry was threatened, we got NASCAR out of it. So, this is a resilient market, like you had mentioned.
Again, it made it through Prohibition.
That's right. If it survived Prohibition, and at the tail end of it, we got a new American pastime, I mean, the only good thing will come out of it. But in the meantime, I'll buy my extra bottle and a half. I mean, I'll do my small part to maintain the market.
There's one other thing that we need to touch on here, which no one in the TSPL has picked up upon quite yet. And it's this. I don't think that distillers are typically or are overly worried about one province in Canada. I think distillers are worried about secondary prices in the US. Because here's the problem. It has been said, and whiskey's much like gasoline, it is a consumable product. If you pause a hiccup in the supply chain, if everyone in the US said, we are not buying gasoline today, for one day, the oil producers would choke on the supply chain backup because they are shipping out tens of millions of gallons per day, expecting it to be consumed. Well, the whiskey business isn't much different. And what distillers have done, and look, this is why whiskey drinkers, we love you. I'm not always thrilled with distillers. And here's why. Distillers have held product back on purpose to create artificial demand through a shortage in supply that's not a real shortage. Allocated bottles in the United States have been held back in order to elevate their prices. So what happens if all of a sudden, all those bottles that they're shipping out every day that are supposed to be allocated and that they've got going up there, all of a sudden, those allocated bottles start choking up. And now when supply increases and demand stays the same, what happens to the price on the economic chart?
It drops.
Yeah.
Consumerism is self-correcting.
Well, when supply goes high and demand stays the same, the intersection of supply and demand is where your price is, and it becomes lower on the price chart.
It's kind of like when COVID was, where everything was shut down, the oil market just crashed because they had all that supply ready to go out, and all of a sudden it came to a screeching halt.
Bingo.
Yep.
So that hiccup in supply chain could be an issue for distillers with the market they've created. I mean, there were bottles that COVID, around the time of COVID, even 2 years ago, were $35 a bottle. All of a sudden, they get a medal. People start paying $100 for it on the secondary market, and that distiller dries up the bottle. Then all of a sudden, about 6-8 months ago, it appears back on the shelf with a retail price of $75. It's still a $35 bottle of whiskey. But because they held back supply, now all of a sudden, that price, they want it up and they want it elevated. But if we get this hiccup, it might disrupt that. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that they'll see at 1%, they'll see a little bit of a hiccup. My thought is, are they capitalizing, are the distillers capitalizing on the fact that the tariffs are being put and that's in the news? So let me capitalize, take this opportunity to say, hey, the poor farmers, the poor this, we're going to have to go up on our prices because we're taking this big hit, which they're not really, maybe not taking a big hit, but Americans are going to go out and support the distillers, say, hey, let's buy more whiskey. And so I wonder if part of it is trying to capitalize on what's going on.
I think you will see a slight hiccup, though, if that happens and they stop ordering, because I know people who go to the Caribbean because they're finding shelves of stuff you can't find here in the U.S. Walker's giving me the finger. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, solve more problems of the world on Implicit Bias Radio.